So let's see, what's the meeting for August 10th? No, it's not the 10th. Today's the 12th, isn't it?
It's, I'll go the 11th.
11th.
Compromise on the 11th.
You're close, Michelle. Neighborhood.
Well, somebody wrote behind Martin's head that's August 10th, so.
Oh, it's a throw you off.
And I was like, wait a minute.
Oh, we had court yesterday.
All right. So I guess we'll just call it to order. And then I see that we have some people in here in the public. So did we have any public comment?
No, those are my kids.
Oh, right.
They're allowed to comment too.
I'm not sure I want them to. It'll be interesting to hear what they have to say.
I wonder.
Oh, that's funny.
And I guess we'll just go to new business and updates then. What do you have for us, Martin?
Just a couple of quick items. I know we want to spend the majority of the time tonight on the policy discussion and the follow-up from last month. Chili Fest. So we've talked about the last couple of months. July 4th event. Thanks again, Ezzy and for Tanya for being there for that. But the next upcoming event, Chili Fest, September 10th. So we'll meet on September 8th. We can talk about it again on the 8th, right before the Chili Fest event happens. But if there is somebody who's already planning to be there, it's a great event. If you haven't been to Chili Fest before, it's a great time. And then if you're available and can spend some time at the committee's booth there, handing out the bags, it would be a great opportunity to do that.
Do you have to be sober?
I don't know. For you, Joe, we might want to set the threshold a little. No. Anybody who's post-tasting of either beer or chili is probably maybe in the best position to be really friendly with the bags. But I'll come back and hit you again. So Chili Fest, if there's anybody who's already planning to be there and wants to set up a time or commit to being there, it's 2 to 6, and it is a good time. So if you have some time, it can be available. We'd like to have somebody at least commit for a portion of the event before we make some space available in the booth there. And Tori's helping with some of the booth stuff. And I think if I remember correctly, the folks who are coordinating this, Tori's part of the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Department. She's here tonight too, if you'll remember her. All the committees will probably be clustered, a little bit like last time.
Mm-hmm.
So that seemed to work. But I know, as you said, it got a little tight with,
Yeah,
you were there
it was a
with
little bit
Parks
tight at times.
Committee and also with Open Space Committee.
Yeah.
You had to elbow in and get a little room in there.
Yeah, and I think even just having like some extra table space would be valuable. Because I think that was actually the main thing, was just that we only had one table and everyone's got their own stuff to show off and highlight. So just having a little more surface space would be ideal.
Additional table space. All right, so we'll make a note. And then a second item that I didn't put on here, Tori Peterson, the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Department is here. She was the staff member who helped coordinate those great sessions with Curtis Manning on the Xeric landscape ideas and just sharing the 7 principles of Xeric landscape in May and June, the two work sessions. So she's working now on an educational program to host in the fall. Still looking at some topics. We might look at something related to composting, some other maybe seasonal or year-round items. But she's working on that now. I was hoping to have something to unveil today, but just hasn't had a chance to come together and finalize yet. So when that's finalized and the details for a program item are set, we'll announce that, or I'll share that with you either in the meeting notes for this meeting, or we'll talk about it next month, and you'll probably see it in the newsletter next month regardless. That was kind of it for the update items on calendar. Newsletter, a lot of the, not usual, but a lot of the frequently noted items are again in this month's newsletter. So if you haven't had a chance to flip through this will probably be one of the last months it has this format. This is the same format we've used for our electronic newsletter for the last 4 or 5 years. And a lot of the folks who look at digital newsletters or online newsletters now, you look at them on an iPad or a tablet or something else, and this format isn't as conducive. Things are more linear rather than having these bookmarks at the top, so we're looking at some formatting changes. But for this month, it'll probably take a month or so to flip through that. Boulder County has the sustainability matching grant program that we've talked about here, and this committee has supported the last 2 years to help us get help get the matching grants awarded to the town. So we had a link to a video that the county's Energy Smart office staff member put together. Leah Yancey was here who's been here in the past that you all know, helped coordinate the development of a video with some other staff members, and it turned out great. And our mayor is in it in 2 spots. So it's a 3.5-minute video.
Boulder County is proud to have strong partnerships with the cities and towns in the county. By working together, we can create greater health and economic vitality in our communities. The Sustainability Matching Grant Program is one way we support the sustainability priorities of cities and towns. It also creates the opportunity for communities to collaborate and leverage all of our resources to advance sustainability on a regional scale.
Sustainability has been really an overarching priority for the city, as it really encompasses environmental health, social equity, and economic vitality. It's really the foundation of a vibrant community.
The town of Superior for many years has had sustainability goals included in our town goals, and we continue that year after year. Want it to be front and center on people's minds.
As a small mountain community, we've experienced both flood and fire, and we're constantly reminded of the fragility of our environment. And since the flood, when we lost so much of our vegetation, we now have an opportunity to build back in a way that respects our environment and in a way that will last.
Due to the generous funding of the Boulder County Matching Grant, we've really been able to pursue a number of our initiatives here in Lafayette that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
With the grant, Louisville was able to create 20 garden plots with soil and irrigation in the community garden. The community and ward identified multiple sustainability priorities and found overwhelming support for their local food production. After the devastating 2013 flood, materials were salvaged from flood-damaged homes before they were demolished. 8,000 pounds of material were collected for redistribution.
The first effort was to get new trash and recycling bins at our town parks and ball fields, and through this effort we've been able to reduce the amount of waste going to landfills by around a third, which is pretty significant.
The City of Longmont provided opportunities for residents to access affordable energy assessments and home improvements. Residents who participate in these programs.
I'll go ahead and end it there. It's another minute and a half chatting about some of the different programs that the county has sponsored through the Sustainability Matching Grant Program. They're all great, and they're all linked in the newsletter this month if you haven't had a chance to take a look. It's some great information. It was great to see our mayor in there, featured a couple of times, both in general about the town's priorities for sustainability and then talking about the grant that we got last year with Boulder County helping us purchase the recycling and compost stations at our facilities around town. So other things that are in the newsletter, the vacancy that this committee still has, 2 vacancies. National Night Out, Art Committee, tree climbing. We had the options for discarding unwanted bulk items, the additional hours for yard waste, the actions to take on wind-blown trash and recycling days. And then I talked a little bit last month about the town's new Call and Ride program that started, a week and a half to almost 2 weeks ago now, which has been great. Had a chance to get some good publicity, and it's gotten off to a good start having the Call and Ride program here again.
I already reserved a permanent time.
Good, yeah. I talked to several people that have.
You know what? I fought for the bus route, and when they took it away, I came here and I brought my kids. None of us had ever ridden the bus, and now that my kids are older, they ride it all the time. So I'm glad that, I was vocal about it, because you can never tell when we have college-age kids or teenagers, and they need to get around on their own. So I love that it came back. I'm so happy about that.
Yeah, it was great.
A lot of people worked hard to do that.
Yeah,
so
it was great. It was a bummer when RTD cut it, and it's great to have it back. So if you haven't had a chance to use it, please do. Please recommend it, and we're doing whatever we can to help promote the service so that our ridership numbers and our average numbers of boardings per hour and per day and per month stay high enough that it isn't considered for being eliminated in the future.
Right.
Couple of additional items. The Energy Smarts energy savings tips from Lee Yancey's office are in here. Modified pool schedule, and then again the slow the flow rebates and indoor and outdoor water audits are noted here, and the charm coupon. Do Good, the Do Good pet owner or guardian reminder to pick up after pets is in here, and the EcoCycle Charm Center and the 50% coupon that we've had for the last several months. So those are the newsletter items. A number of them, as you guys know, are ongoing and will continue to run. There'll be the indoor audits as we switch away from outdoor irrigation to the indoor water consumption audits. That'll be the change in the next month or two. That's it for newsletter items. The 2017 budget we talked a little bit about last month, and the recommendation from this group to include the items that were basically the items that were in this year's budget, to continue to promote those and recommend those, were carried over into the preliminary budget. And the budget is now, the preliminary balanced budget has been published and distributed to the members of the board, and it's available online. It's available here, and we've emailed it to a few folks that are interested in it. So a little bit like you've heard from me in the past, the town board has a finance committee of the whole, more or less. All board members are invited to be participants in the town board's finance committee review of the budget. And we will hold finance committee meetings. There'll be a couple this month, and then a work session next month, and then the board will consider the adoption of the budget on October 10th. So if anybody is interested in attending, I can't remember if anybody from this committee attended last year or not, but the finance committee meetings will be on August 30th and 31st from 9 to noon. And if you remember the description of that kind of experience from last year, the last time I mentioned it, it's the line-by-line, fund-by-fund review of the entire budget for the town. That's why it takes multiple hours over multiple days to get through it all and make sure that the board has a sense of everything that's in it, and ask questions that may be of interest or are unclear in what's in the budget, and then can decide on items or respond to questions that staff might have on items that might make sense on timing or on capital projects or on operating projects, and then we'll go back and adjust it according to whatever the board's wishes are in order to have something that's balanced and final for the October 10th meeting. So that's kind of the budget calendar. And then Colleen, so I had a note here to mention again the Free Cycle event. You were going to try and go to the Youth Leadership
Right.
Council meeting last month, but we had the wrong date, or you had
I did,
I didn't
so
either I didn't tell it to you right, or just didn't get translated right.
just
So
put it
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm going to go to the next one.
Okay.
So definitely.
Okay. And then again, the vacancies still exist on this committee. So if there's anybody you know that's interested, please have them give us a call, or have them come by, or attend a meeting, or watch a video of a meeting, or and if they're interested in an application, it's on our website, and I'll be glad to email it to them. And that was kind of it for the new business and updates. I know the group wanted to try and reserve the majority of the time tonight to go over the discussion item, the commercial green building measures.
So Essie did an awesome job of giving us at least some sort of a structure. I think there's more to it than that, but starting that out. So I think everybody who has it in front of them, is that an issue without that being electronic, Martin?
I do. I have it electronically. So a couple of things. Michelle
should
can
have
mention.
it, right?
She does. I sent it to her earlier. So Essie had a chance. Thanks for taking the time to forward the sustainability options that you felt would make sense to divide it up. It looked like 3 or so items for a few of the items, and then the general community items. And I think your suggestion, Essie, was to pick two. Was it two per category? Yeah, choose two from each of the categories.
I was looking at 2 total, but
2 totals, what he said.
yeah, but I'd be happy to talk about changing that. That was just a random number, so.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good kind of like a base point, but yeah, as I was explaining to Essie before the meeting started, I think we should add on, whatever we do, we should add on a little bit of weight so there's something for the board to trim if they would like. What do you think, Joe?
Little weight, you mean food?
Yeah.
And then
Because we kind of know where we've been before with them, so they feel like we get something, we feel like we do too.
I think this idea, without seeming to impose on anything, is the way to go. I think this is heading down the right path.
Yeah, I agree. Very much agree. So I was wondering if everybody thought, if we maybe like just split this up, maybe if we all talked about just the categories really quick, and if we thought that there were any more categories that they should go, and then we'll kind of break it down and go through the things in each category and see if there's anything that we for sure want to add. But I do agree that maybe we keep a maximum number of 5 maybe in each category. I know Essie has like 3 in there. So if there's anything we want to add, really keep it trim and skin that way.
Yeah.
So we'll just break it up that way, and then we can talk about what we think is best to request of the board in terms of, like you said, how many do we do, or should we assign a point value? And we'll discuss that route last if everybody's good with that.
And also just to throw out there, I know Sharon had mentioned transportation in the original document. And since there were only a couple I could really find that would be specific to builders, I just kind of lumped those in with the kind of general stuff.
I liked it being called community. I thought that was good.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think transportation kind of goes in there because it's really more like about your bigger.
Yeah, mostly it's like you're looking at bike racks and EV infrastructure and things like that. So.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Michelle, before you jump in on that,
No, you're
I
good.
put up on the screen, Lisa Skumatz is on the phone with us. Lisa, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, good. So the email that you sent me right before the meeting, Lisa, is up on the screen. So Lisa had forwarded some feedback on this. She was interested.
First time I mentioned on the general community and transportation, something about walkability would seem like to be a value. Walkability or trails or something would be a good add, and that would be something that the board would probably like if it adds relevant. So, and we looked at trails as a requirement sort of in some of the other developments around, so we might give them a heads up about that, linking in the trail system where possible, blah, blah, blah. But on the one that's up on the board, I like this idea of options and tailoring for individual buildings and all that. But I also worry that there's a lot of flexibility here, and that it doesn't seem like there's anything that requires, unless I'm misinterpreting the first item under energy efficiency, it doesn't seem like there's anything that requires them to beat IECC. And I think if that isn't something that's required up front, it'll be very hard for us to get imposed at the point at which they're already sort of submitting plans with some, that will have a little bit of flexibility, but maybe not as much flexibility as we want, and they'll say, oh, we didn't know that you wanted us to have really good energy efficiency. We thought this was all, just sort of tweaking here and there. I think it's really important because these buildings last forever, because you have to design real energy efficiency and upfront when you're, orientation and everything like that matters. I think it's really important to say, okay, we're starting with you have to reach, X% better than IECC, and on energy only. I'm not even going to go to the mat about anything else, but let's talk about energy only. I think they should come in expecting that they're going to have to beat it by a certain percent. And then on top of that every building has to meet, we could have this list of options for other things that we're also going to require based on a building specific or a business type specific or other basis. But I think if we don't have something that they're mandated to do, then I'm really afraid that one, they'll say they can't do it because they weren't well aware up front. And two, frankly, who knows what the councils will be in the future, and they may cave on every one of these or all the important ones or something. They may negotiate them out. And that really worries me. The main thing is I think that if we don't let them know well and clearly up front that significant energy stuff is going to be required here, that there will be a million excuses as to why they can't do it.
So I agree, Lisa. So I know Essie's about to say something, but I do definitely want to backtrack and focus kind of on the order of things. And the reason being is because when we were at last month's meeting, we kind of addressed the reasoning behind going this way. And while we don't disagree with yours, it's about a specific timeline. And we thought that this was one thing that we could for sure sneak in. But I think that we could talk about building that into the mission statement at the front, what you're talking about with the IECC percentages. But
well, I think there are two different things. So one thing we had talked about at the last meeting was, it sounds like it's going to be hard to convince the board to push through an increase in the baseline efficiency relative to IECC. And so I think it's fantastic to do like what Boulder has done and do, for example, 30% better than IECC. And so one thing we had discussed is bringing that up at the next logical place in terms of renewing IECC and looking at building codes. And this would be something that would be in addition to that would be separate, which is something that we might be able to do at a slightly earlier time frame. And so this would be different from the mandatory stuff in terms of mandating that every building meet 30% over IECC. This would be about kind of some optional things that everyone would have to do above and beyond that we could kind of hopefully get approval on really quickly, as opposed to some of the baseline efficiency things, which are definitely absolutely valuable, but may take a little more time and energy to actually get through the board. And so these are really kind of like looking at different options for things to do that would be above and beyond the baseline. So that would give.
That's strategy, but what if the board says, you know, we already dealt with this issue of energy efficiency and sustainability. We're done for another 2 years, and every building in town center goes in.
Right.
You're screwed.
Yeah.
Don't disagree, but we definitely have an issue. We literally are going to be having buildings permits come in a month, and we know for a fact that the town board is not going to just shove in an energy requirement. So we need to take an opportunity to put something that would be acceptable to them. And I think there's a way that we could build in what you're talking about.
And because this is also optional, all the energy efficiency things, like the idea I had for this particular structure is that because a building owner could pick and choose which specific measures they want to do, some of which are energy, but many of which are not. It doesn't really, I think we can make a very strong argument that there's still, strong needs around having baseline energy efficiency improvements to the code and adopting something like Boulder. I would think it should be easy to make the argument that Boulder and other neighboring areas are already doing these things, and so, it should be a no-brainer to adopt a, for example, 30% over ICC code type requirement. But really the issue is that, I think we can have two separate things, one of which is kind of optional and one of which is mandatory, and kind of approach it two different ways that, either way we want to get stuff, improvements made as quickly as possible to the town center. And so I think we should focus on both, but I don't think they're contradictory. I think they can be complementary instead.
And I'm not saying I'm saying that you put in both. And if you don't put this in now, then, you were talking about what can we let them cut out? Well, they can cut that out for now and say we'll deal with it later, but if you cut it out, then the chance of it being considered is zero.
Right, that's why we kind of want to piece this apart, because we can add that in. So if we can start by piecing this apart and making sure that we have everything constructed, we can put that in where we think it's appropriate, and like you said, it can be cut. So it'd be great if we can kind of
And I
just
actually
do
think from that
yeah.
perspective, it'd be more helpful to have two separate proposals rather than kind of one with multiple aspects. And so I think I'd be happy submitting a proposal, pending everyone else's opinions, obviously, with kind of two different aspects for the board to consider, one of which is the 30% over IECC, and the second part is these options for builders, because, ideally, they'd approve both of those. I have my doubts about whether or not that'll actually happen, but if one of those gets dropped, it seems like the optional building things would be more of something that would be easier for them to keep and justify, at least in the short term. And then we can continue as an advisory committee to push really hard for improvements to overall building code. So, so if that sounds good, I think we can do both of those and propose both of those to the board, but have them be kind of separate ideas, because one's mandatory versus the other one that's a little bit more flexible and optional.
I do have a question. Lisa brings this up, and just knowing this isn't some local person building, and they're going to say, oh, this is my community. I want it to be, to have bicycles and have all this. You either have to require it, or you have to prove that it's going to bring in a little more money when they're selling the houses and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think that I think if we hand out and just say, oh, we'd like the builder to do these, I personally, I kind of think they'll just laugh at us.
Well, that's why these would be required that you do at least a couple of them, but it's which one you can do.
Okay,
so there is a mandatory component, but it's not. Yeah.
A mandatory, but they get to choose among it. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, right. But
whereas something like
some of these they can do when you're asking the plan, but they can stop them 2 months later. They can take out recycling containers. They can take out, they can't take out the irrigation. I get that, and others, but a lot of them they could do. They could throw something at it and then back off, and that's permanent, lasting things. I think is really important.
So one of the other
point. They have to do this. That's the whole point. It'd be great if we could, chunk back to get this done. I'm sorry, it's like we've got less than an hour, so I just want to make sure we keep on track.
And one of the other things we talked about a lot at the last session, Lisa, just for your edification, is that in terms of staffing for. Obviously, we'd like to have really robust energy and sustainability goals, but a lot of that comes down to, at least for the more sophisticated energy and sustainability stuff that you can do, how do you verify that? And there's not currently budget set aside for really in-depth verification. And so the general consensus last time.
By somebody and have them, require a signature by someone that's therein, that's responsible. That doesn't require very much enforcement on our end. or somebody with a certificate after their name put a signature on something.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, if I could jump in. Lisa, this is
And
what...
I'm trying to talk quick so I don't hold up the meeting. I'm only going off the fact that, I know they're changing people who come to these meetings. And so for a number of weeks, we were talking about a number of meetings, we were talking about something more big. And now the last whole meeting, some of that's changed. But I'm just not saying that I felt that dismissed what we talked about earlier. I'm bringing it up again because not all people were in all meetings.
Yeah, and our idea was just that rather than dropping the discussion of ICC, for example, or anything like that, it was just looking for a really quick win that we can hash out in this particular meeting and then go back to the discussion of the bigger trends as well. So that way we could have a mix of things that are likely to actually be implemented as quickly as possible, in addition to the bigger things that may be more contentious with the board and things like that, that we'll definitely want to continue pushing for either way. But this is just something that we're looking at that could be kind of a shorter, quicker win. So I keep
the point, it's fine.
Yeah.
We can go on.
Okay.
And I absolutely agree. I would
Yeah.
love to push for 30% over ICC and everything. So I don't disagree at all with your viewpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's really important to do.
So, Michelle, this is Lisa. This is Martin speaking. The requirements may be optional to choose from, I think, if I'm understanding the proposal. But once something is approved by the board as part of an FDP, it's a requirement. There's nothing optional about it. So
Right.
maybe it's just a semantics split there. But if anything is approved by the board as a requirement per a final development plan, it no longer is optional.
Yep, absolutely. It's definitely going to be a requirement.
There's
So,
enforcement if it's removable, and that's the problem.
yeah. I mean, and what we should do, Holly, when we look at these, is piece them apart and see if there is something that's removable. Maybe consider not having things like that be an option in them. So let's go back.
Yeah, and that's why I'd like to kind of go through each
Yeah.
of the points and see if there's anything that's, has opportunities for, loopholes or people taking advantage of the system or something like that as well. Because obviously if we have some really rigorous stuff and then a couple that are really easy to work around, then that's less than ideal.
Right.
So
I guess, we'll just push back and then go back to the categories then. I mean, I personally think that having 4 categories is good, because you don't want to get too far, right? I mean, does anybody have any problem with there being the energy, the water, the waste, and the community, which is kind of an open-ended one to some extent, but sort of encompasses our little microcosm here?
And based on my review, and hi Lisa, my name is Sharon Procopio. We haven't met yet, but hello virtually from afar. I helped to kind of put together some of the initial kind of brainstorming on some of these options. These are pretty much the standard categories, and I like the idea of keeping them short and simple. The community one, the categories that came up a lot when I looked at this, just for a note, was a lot, I think you mentioned, Lisa, the livable community or walkability. That all fits in this kind of livable community, local economy kind of piece that I think you can say rolls into that final general category. So I think it's pretty fitting.
another idea too was to, that I didn't get to add to here, was to add something about shade trees as well. So for example, one of the options could be planting, 4 shade trees or something like that, which does help with energy once they're mature, and also with kind of the walkable, community-centric type of goals that we're going for. So
you could put that under the category.
And I don't know about the balance of water use there, so I've always wondered about that.
Okay, so we'll start with the energy efficiency category then. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know if anybody is against putting a number on there, but I think keeping them even is a good idea. So sticking to, maximum 5, but we should keep it even. If we have 5 in one category, we should have 5 in another
5 in each
category.
I think the general one could have a couple more just because it's
It's a longer category.
That's true, that's a very good point, yeah.
They should definitely be allowed to vary if that's what's relevant.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we'll just go with number 1. So create a plan to achieve Energy Star building certification. It seems fairly simple, yeah?
That's just getting the rating, basically.
Well,
from
and this is
Energy
actually,
Star.
my idea was actually getting the Energy Star certification,
And
which
achieve
means
it.
benchmarking,
Right,
with
right.
portfolio manager getting in the upper 25%, I believe, and then getting official certification from Energy Star.
So that would be post-development,
You
right?
should be clear on that,
Oh, that's
because I
true.
had no idea if this was write a plan and then never do anything more, or what. I did not know what that was, so.
Yeah, I was trying to, because it's called Energy Star certified, so I wasn't sure if there's a more clear way to write that up, so.
So there's a couple pieces, I think, just to emphasize as we look through this for everyone. Lisa, when we talked last week, and just to make sure, Martin, we're on the same page, the idea is we wanted to at least start initially with things that would come up during the development review process for commercial buildings. So we're thinking of things that they could do during the construction process, meaning a site developing engineering company could see this list and know what they need to do for building. So my only concern with the Energy Star certification is it's probably more for a building owner operator, which is still something that could be required. And we talked about maybe doing the redevelopment and business owner based things as another list, maybe.
Yeah, and making sure that anybody who does build here knows that once the building is built, that will be an expectation in the future,
Yeah.
but it's an ongoing thing. It's not a new construction item. So that was kind of the line that this group had identified.
However, you could use LEED for neighborhood development or any number of LEED certifications for commercial buildings. If we're looking for kind of getting it to a high building standard through a certification program, which is voluntary instead of, not necessarily in lieu of, but in addition to an IECC multiplier. So just something to note. I think it's very valuable, and I think benchmarking through Energy Star is important, but the developer won't have a role, and they'll look at that and kind of shrug and say,
no, that's a great point.
Cool.
Okay. Definitely makes sense.
So it's on the right track. So what would we suggest then that would be the better way to express wanting that sort of a?
I know
Measure.
Boulder's plan, we want to beat the energy performance by 30%, but they don't require the LEED certification because they think the process can get
cumbersome,
burdensome, and expensive. So I think we need to be careful if we want the builders to get certified.
Well, it's a multiple choice option, so it's their choice out of this list of
Yeah, and that's
20
why they could
things.
choose.
They could say, maybe they're already planning on doing it, and it's an easy one to say, well, we already do LEED buildings, so sure, we'll pick this option. Or it's something they want to showcase because they really want the town center to stand
So
out.
you think that Energy Star and LEEDs are kind of interchangeable? Is that?
They're
your
different.
thought?
They're very
Well, I know
different.
they are different, but I mean, in
Yeah,
terms of.
they're interchangeable. For this list, I would say if we're thinking of a list you would give for development review, I would say you want a construction-based certification, so LEED would be the most appropriate and the most commonly adopted, I think, that's out there. There's a few other, the IGCC, the internet, that's the other one, not the energy code, but the green
Green building
construction code.
Yeah.
You could, without requiring that code, you could point to, that's not a certification program, but you could say, use this code or as a guideline. But I like the idea of saying, if you could become LEED certified, that would be an option to getting to this menu of options.
And that wouldn't go under energy. I mean, that's energy, water.
That's
waste,
everything.
Yeah, so it would go back under general.
Yeah, there is no, I'm trying to think if there's an energy-specific certification.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think,
Really,
too.
it's just LEED. And then I guess you could get a building performance rating for the building through Energy Star without going through the certification process for the developer.
Well, and that's what I was thinking about with asset score, because that's better
Oh, yeah,
in terms
yeah.
of just looking at the structural components
You're
of
right.
the building. So
a
that's-
developer could technically acquire to that level before handing it over.
Because the developers could definitely do asset score without doing the full portfolio manager, which is more
Mhm.
about like looking at kind of occupancy as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
I think the
I
asset
think
score
that's
is
good.
probably the better way to go. And,
Okay.
I mean, LEED still, maybe LEED is at the bottom under general as another free for all option for like if they want to go big.
And maybe if you say, if they want to go big and they do the LEED, I mean.
Maybe they only need one option if they do that. The only problem with LEED is it is a certification program that once you walk away from it has no
ongoing
And that's one of my concerns, because I know especially for the energy side of things, like whereas Energy
Yeah.
Star tends to be more validated and stuff, LEED
Right.
is not necessarily that way, and there have been a lot of LEED projects that were supposed to be super energy efficient that at the end of the day weren't. But then they also, the building owners at that point are like, well, we have a LEED whatever building, so we don't need to do efficiency, and it's harder to re-engage them at that point. So
Right.
that's my only concern about LEED, but.
They have a question as to whether or not we want to keep something like that in, but keep it in the thought for maybe something to really push more research on and see
Yeah.
how we can get something like that to
A
be.
lot of times if a developer is going to do it, it's because they want to do it for their own benefit, not
Right.
necessarily because they're being told to do it.
Mhm.
It benefits them to do it if they're doing it. If they don't do it, it's probably because it is too expensive or time consuming.
That's true.
But it doesn't hurt to have it as an option. But I would say the Energy Star building certification is something to move off this list, but put on a back burner for a list
Yeah, I think
for
that makes sense.
business
And actually, at the
owners.
end of this, I have a whole list of stuff that
Yeah,
I originally had on. They
I
pulled
saw
off
that.
what I
No, that
realized
was
it
really great. It was
yeah.
super. I like how you organized this.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, so we know where we're at on that top
So
one.
strike that out.
So the
Oh,
question
wait,
is.
I wanted to add, I talked about it before, and it's the passive solar. You know, I was talking about that windy orientation, and then people were saying, no, it doesn't. No, in some houses, it can cut down energy costs by 85%. And not only that, it makes the buildings more livable, because no one likes to have that office without a window. And that you can just by turning a building and making the windows a little bit bigger, you can actually, you know, that's a huge, it was even bigger of an energy efficiency than I ever expected when I went and researched it.
It is within IECC code 20. I think it actually is kind of implicitly in the existing 2012 code. It's not explicit how it's positioned, but there is an element of this that I've seen, and then the
and Energy
IGCC
Star
has it as well.
And one of the big problems too is that as you start scaling buildings, the benefits of doing passive solar type stuff and good design, I mean, it's definitely worth doing, but the benefits decrease the larger the building is.
Right.
Because the area of the building shell compared to the volume is smaller.
For commercial, and
For
because we're
commercial,
looking at this
yeah.
list for commercial development for the town center, the residential piece, which is coming later, right, Martin? The residential developments aren't happening imminently.
In the town center, yeah, so
It's happening
Are they parallel?
simultaneously.
they'll be
Okay.
parallel from now on. Yeah, the
But
board
you guys
approved the
aren't-
project last month. for
And this
residential.
might come down more to a regulatory versus voluntary thing. That is something that you would really want to have in your building code as something like you're adopting the IECC plus 30%. Probably meets that, or you could amend and add part of the green code, but that's an ordinance requirement, or a builder probably isn't going to do that on the fly because it requires some guidance. You can't just say, use passive solar. They have to have some guideline. And I think that would be a ordinance that you'd have to explore, not necessarily.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a
something you're
guideline,
gonna
it would be
Yeah.
it would be an ordinance.
It'd be a
I think if that's
requirement.
something
It'd be
that
a
we
law.
incorporate into, you know, the ICC changes and stuff like that, then that'd be ideal. And then we can actually, you know, have something that's enforceable as
Okay.
opposed to something that's more voluntary, which
Are
I
we-
think would be great.
Where did, we already did a residential green code.
We did.
Mhm.
That's overlaid on, so I'm not sure how this would play with that.
Yeah, this would be
It-
more on the
yeah,
commercial
it's
side,
a
at
good
least,
point,
but-
Joe, but it would be separate use. So we have the residential programs already codified in a separate chapter, and it's identified with the HERS and the rating program, just for residentials, completely separate classification of building.
Right.
Just for commercial, this would be something that's over and above, and it would be a big
Yeah, I
policy
understand
change.
that, but as we've segued into talking residential green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and we don't really.
And
We already have something that applies to
We've
that.
already done,
Mhm.
I don't know if we've done all we ever want to do, but we've done,
Hopefully not.
We've taken a big step.
yeah.
So we'd like to take a big step on the commercial end, yeah. All right, so back to the energy efficiency thing. So then, as you had suggested, evaluate the building using the DOE's free asset score and release results publicly. I mean, I think that's a fairly simple one,
Are
but
these
does it
things
accomplish
understandable
anything?
to- Are these understandable to the developers?
I think we would probably take one more pass to finalize to make sure. It would probably be helpful to take this to a commercial developer, and just have them review to make sure it's clear, to avoid that confusion. But I think it's close. I would probably, is the asset score Department of Energy, or is it specifically, there's a subcategory? Like, they might know it, but they probably.
Well, so the thing with asset scores is very new, and so I doubt
Yeah.
most builders will be familiar with it, but it's something that's very simple conceptually, and
Right.
they can go on, I actually linked to it for that reason, so that they can click on and
So
see.
we
and
could,
it's-
I think it will be explanatory. I think the question is to make it very clear what the aim is of each bullet.
Exactly, yeah, because that would be my concern. It's like, in release results publicly, I think that's great, but we should at least give a minimum that they have to attain.
No, I
Maybe
don't-
with that, you know?
I don't think you have to give the minimum, because the whole point of benchmarking isn't to shame someone
Okay.
or penalize. It's to know that score and know that it can be improved.
Okay.
And I don't think a new construction building is going to be in the low end of the asset score
Okay.
system,
Okay.
unless there was a serious problem.
Martin, I sent an email about this one too. I was in favor because I think it's a way to incentivize buildings to do better
Mhm.
Okay.
give them,
Mhm.
they'll get better rent if
Yeah.
they're a better scorer.
Very
Exactly,
nice.
and what it does is
Mhm.
it starts the conversation, and from day one that the building's created, really starts this conversation about how energy efficient is it. To Lisa's point, you can drive, more renters and more interest and make the buildings more competitive as well.
Well, and the town, because
and the
honestly,
town, exactly,
you guys
yeah.
could end up being like the first town that had every building in your town center have an asset score.
Yeah. Exactly,
Because that
yeah.
probably isn't very common, given how new it is. So
Yeah,
if you
we
made
can
that
kind
a
of be
goal,
a shining example for
Yeah.
using this, which I think
No,
would be
that's
awesome.
good. I like how simple
So-
it is, and I like that it benefits both sides. It's not just the builder.
Yeah, and it's not a
potentially
super
occupancy.
in-depth measure to do either. So
Mhm.
if builders are concerned about,
Right.
expense and stuff, this is something that they can do that still benefits the community and the town center, but
Okay.
isn't
and it's
gonna be a
important to
whole
make
lot
them
of
understand there's no
cost.
penalty. The score is there to be publicly available for accountability. It's
Right,
not
exactly.
you'll be fined $1 for every point you are below something.
Right.
Even in the Boulder benchmarking program, which we worked on, the idea was to make sure the building owners knew that there's nothing wrong with having a low-performing building. The idea is to save yourself money, you should be increasing your performance and decreasing your costs.
And you can look at these things and get ideas.
Yeah,
So
it's
a lot of
really
the
just
triggers and thoughts
economics.
more than
It's not
anything.
meant to.
Yeah.
It's not meant to cost them anything. It should have anything.
Mhm.
It should be saving them over time.
Right, exactly.
So I like that one.
Under the energy efficiency, when in the development process, can we give them something that, so that they could get a score and they can start benchmarking, and then there's the renewable, but what about like install all programmable thermostats and light sensors in every room?
Isn't that part of IECC to have
Yeah,
programmable
that's more
thermostats?
part of the kind of building code type
It's
thing.
already in the building
It
code?
should be
or
in
is it
building
not?
code. I think
I-
today's modern
yeah.
building code, if it didn't require programmable thermostats, I would fall over. I haven't read it head to toe, but
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that
It's in
type
there.
of stuff is more in the building code, so.
yeah, I think it is.
But I'll look while we're doing it. Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely good to confirm.
Because we're at 2012 or 2015?
12.
2012, yeah.
Because that would be another one of our recommendations.
Sure.
This is a separate note. But anyways, okay, great.
And
So
then
on to the next one then. I really like, even though it's a fairly broad statement, I like the generality of it because it gives them options.
Mhm.
Like Colleen was talking about, this would make them think about passive solar and things like that.
Mhm.
So I guess, Lisa, this is where I would kind of back onto you and to our guest expertise when, like Essie suggests putting in production capacity. So how do you
Thank
guys
you.
feel about that, like in terms of how that's gone before with your, I guess your experience in general, like saying a capacity, is that really something that's necessary or?
Oh, you mean the 5%
Yeah.
requirement?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't give a requirement, then saying that they should do it could be literally like a decorative windmill on the front door.
29th Street in Boulder. They've got that like wind turbine and solar thing.
Yeah,
that can do
I mean,
anything.
I think if
There's
you
one
don't
in
give some
Lafayette.
number, they don't know what to aim for. It's just that sense of they need something to aim for. 5%'s not out of the realm for, especially with solar on a commercial building. That would be fairly easy to obtain. Some of the other ones, it might be more
So
challenging.
that's the question, is 5% too low?
I think if you're looking at like geothermal and some of the other things,
Yeah.
it's not too bad.
I
Because
think
if
it's
you want to
not-
have it general, then you want to.
It's not, honestly, it starts the conversation, and frankly, once they start the process, if it's 8% or 10% by the time they're done,
Okay.
great. I think the big,
And I just bet not many people will pick it.
yeah,
Okay.
it's possible.
If it's optional, I bet they won't pick it because it's going to require an investment.
Mhm. Unless you're looking at people like,
Assign the point.
Right,
Yeah.
if it's weighted
Some
more.
water pumps and bike racks.
well, that's the thing, that's why I kind of was thinking about a point thing, because it's like if we give that a big, let's just say 10,
Right.
where other things are like 2.
That's
you know,
why
we're
the
only talking
pick
about 15
two-
points, they might be like, ooh.
It's
Yeah.
kind of more like how LEED does their rating system, is you need
But
points.
We're going to want to assign the points based largely on price and then, secondarily on,
Complexity.
Yeah.
Complexity and
what's gonna
price.
drive it.
Absolutely.
I would say, instead of just focusing just on on-site, I wondered, Essie, because I know you didn't include the idea of being able to purchase wind power, which I had suggested.
So I was thinking that was more at the building owner level rather than at
Oh,
the
you're right, it's not
builder.
developer. You're exactly
Yeah,
right.
that's why I had
Thank
that
you.
in
See,
there. and
this is
then-
why even my own brain needs that training. No, you're right. So providing the on-site aspect is important then. I think that makes sense. The other thing, you could technically say if they provided some space on their property for a community solar garden, so setting aside space for
That's true.
something, if they didn't feel like building it, they could just set aside space to provide something for another organization to come in and do. That wouldn't even need to be associated with the building, frankly, at that point. It's just that they're giving you space to then work with community solar gardens in Colorado. So that might be a separate line item, but since we took out the certification one, I kind of wanted to throw that one back in there just because I do think.
Yeah, I think that'd be good, and then we'd have 3 bullet points again.
Right,
which would be
and realistically,
excellent.
if a developer had to choose between putting solar on the roof of a building or giving up a quarter tenth of an acre, honestly, they'd probably put solar on the roof of their building.
Yeah.
So sometimes you want to give them something that's not desirable
No, I
to
think
make
that
the other
sounds great,
things look
yeah.
more desirable.
And I'm also, and just as a general FYI for everyone, I've been in talks with Excel, so my contacts are putting me in touch with Excel's community project manager. So hopefully in the coming couple months we can talk with them and see if there's something special we can do with Excel. So that's totally different from this,
Sure.
but you know, in terms of community solar, that might be a potential option going forward. I'm not sure what their current offerings look like, but.
Yep, I think that makes sense though. And yes, you're correct. The wind would be something that we should add that to our future back burner Energy Star certification and wind for building owners.
Yeah. Cool. So does that sound good to have those 3 bullets, and then we can move on to water?
Well, wouldn't mind, and I'm not against having just those 3 bullets, but I wouldn't mind going ahead and putting in something very similar, like you said, like the shade trees / orientation / passive solar type of thing.
Oh, that's
I don't know
another.
if you guys thought that
technically
was
that's an energy
worthwhile.
efficiency one.
Is there a single metric or standard around orientation or passive solar that we could reference to say yes or no that someone's achieving it? Because that's my only concern there is that.
How would you know?
I mean, passive solar is great, but it's
I don't
really
know how
hard.
you would know that they're achieving it because they're gonna. A building designer is gonna design, assuming that doesn't
Right.
work, or that to some extent they're gonna come up with their design, include the passive solar, but you can't tell that they might still have the heat on, I guess is the
exactly.
problem. So can you really control that?
But we could do shade trees and move shade trees up to energy if that sounds good to everyone.
Okay.
And just set a certain minimum. I can look at the Arbor Day Foundation has a new program that they've been working with utilities all across the U.S. with in terms of planting shade trees. So I can look at what their standards are around orientation stuff and come up with some ideas about that.
And I did confirm
Without
that.
the shade trees, much problems with solar. I couldn't put solar on my house up here because you had to have screening from the waterfront, and it made it so that the solar didn't make sense. So
That's true.
all these things are so integrated. That's why I think that building performance is ultimately the key.
Yeah.
And then they can make the decisions about orientation and solar and all the rest of it. But
Yeah, I agree.
feeling it is going to cause a problem, I think.
Okay.
So maybe we should hold off on the shade trees in general then and let that be part of the overarching kind of mandatory code design type thing.
That would be a good thing for code.
Okay. So let's get rid of shade
maybe
trees
just
for the
leave
time being at
orientation,
least.
passive solar. And,
Yeah.
Okay, and I did verify that lighting controls, and not specifically, but they are very much all over the IECC commercial, so it's, yeah. So I think we're good on that end, but I think that was a great point. That was the 2012 at least. All right,
And
good.
you
So-
didn't want to include EV for the developer to install just because you were thinking of cost versus.
I actually put that in general or
Oh,
community building
even
because I think
better.
that's
more of a
it's not really
community
an
element.
efficiency thing.
You're right. It's
energy
the
load,
opposite
but-
of an efficiency thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Valid point.
Doesn't Boulder County have like a half matching right now? If someone puts in an EV, I think I've been reading about that recently.
That they do.
They were remodeling up in Gun Barrel, and they were willing to put in half, and they were just remodeling a business, and they qualified for that, and they
Yeah, they had a
refused it.
grant. They had some grants to
Right.
help put it in. But you're right. It's more of a community benefit, not an energy benefit. So
But-
then we can
And
jump
the
to
towns
water.
receive those grants to install the EV stations that we have.
Yeah.
So is that even anything we want to address with the builder? Is that something we can go in later? Is it better to have the builder put it in, and maybe, is it better for them to do it while they're building and get the grants and?
Sure, if you're ever going to dig when
Yeah,
there's no
dig when
concrete.
you're building.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, and those kinds of resources, that's another thing to talk about at the end, is if there's resources to help the developer do any of this with things like that, we should make sure they know about it so that it's less of a cost.
I believe things like PACE can also be applied to new building as well, right? So we can
Right.
definitely leverage things like that as well in terms of providing assistance.
Yep.
And actually, I heard that PACE is now expanding back to residential again, so I don't know what the timeframe's like that for
I don't
that,
know.
but that'd be cool to talk about at a future meeting at some point.
Pick Leah's brain.
All right, perfect. So
PACE
let's.
is a loan program for sustainable building.
Oh, okay.
So it's really awesome. They provide all sorts of assistance and stuff, as well as monetary assistance as well. So they're great. But
Who's it through?
Boulder County.
I believe it's it's locally through Boulder County, but it's a national program.
Okay.
So.
Federally funded.
Okay.
It's a
Yeah.
local
So-
program.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the water conservation category then. And I just want to make sure, if there was anything that you guys wanted to add to a category, make sure to say something, yeah? But, you
I'll
know,
go ahead and
move on,
update
but I
this
think we're good.
later tonight
Yeah.
or tomorrow, and then Martin sent around a copy that's been
Sure.
revised, and then maybe, sure, I don't know what your time availability is like, but if you want to take a look at it and have kind of a more professional
I think
overview
it
of
looks,
to make
it looked
sure-
really nice and clean. I think.
Oh, cool, okay.
Yeah, it looks good. I'll try to put on my developer hat when I read it and see if anything sounds confusing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So water conservation, I think there's some great ideas. Accessible water fountains with water bottle filling stations. Passive rainwater harvesting elements. Of course, that's quite a contentious thing right now.
It's legal.
It's legal, but
Definitely.
it's bad.
It's not legal
But I
for
like it.
commercial, I don't
Oh,
think.
well, no, rain barrels are not legal, but
Yeah.
passive water harvesting is
Okay.
because rain barrels are active water harvesting. Passive
Oh,
water
okay.
harvesting is actually the art of designing your landscape to catch water so you don't
Like
need
our whole
sprinklers.
town is done in terms of like.
Right,
recycling.
exactly.
Okay, fair enough. That sounds awesome.
We
So
flooded,
that's
so
good.
we're doing well on that.
Oh, let's see, and then implement smart irrigation using water sensors, and, I mean, I think those are all great. Is there anything else internally that we can do? I suspect that a
to
lot
the
of it's
building?
covered by the IECC, so.
Well, no, IECC is just the energy code.
Oh,
The
so it
building
doesn't do any water
code
conservation.
would
What about-
be,
What do you think, Lisa? Do you have anything that you think could be like more internally to the building that would be appealing to somebody? Maybe she went. In terms of the water conservation, do you know, like, is there anything else off the top of your head that you would thought would have been better to include for internal stuff? Right now, we just have like the water bottle filling stations. Is there any other thing that we should
I
add?
did have a question on whether the codes that we have now require the low flow that's mentioned in the goals of sustainability development in Sharon's email.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering as well.
Yeah.
I just kind of assumed, I didn't include those because I was wondering if those were part of our existing building codes. I
So
don't
should
know.
we include them and then maybe
check the code.
backtrack and just double
Yeah.
check that our code does include that? Is
Yeah.
that a thought?
If the code
I'll
includes
put
it.
in and then
Okay.
if we discover it's included, take it out, but I think it seems pretty basic.
Okay, I agree. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Look at that. We just knocked that one out
Hey,
in minutes.
easy peasy.
All right, waste management, my favorite part. All right, so identify areas within the development for on-site composting programs. And obviously, you know, the rest of that goes hand in hand. Provide combined recycling, composting, and trash receptacles throughout the building.
The question is, would the developer do that or would that be building
Can I
owner?
ask Martin a question here?
Yeah.
Sure.
Martin, our code, our ordinance requires recycling in commercial, or does it only require in single family and multifamily?
Requires it in commercial.
Oh.
So it requires contracting with a hauler and recycling, basically.
It doesn't require the act of it, it requires parity in space, if you remember the ordinance. It doesn't require the
Space
service.
is way different. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actively requires recycling.
Exactly.
Contracting, collection, whatever.
It does not.
If it
No.
doesn't, I think this should.
It does not, and I agree with you because, yeah, we know that that new building built by a Land Rover has nothing available for recycling. They don't even have space, so, yeah. So I agree with you, Lisa. So how would we best word that then?
Is that
Would be a
internal to
good
the
way
building
say
or
that?
external?
Require, recycling service must be contracted for and used.
Okay.
Now, is that for a building owner or the developer? Because that sounds like something the building owner, the person that takes over the building.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
an
No, I mean,
ongoing
it's
item.
good to know, but I think it's important to
Okay.
distinguish because the developer will go, sounds
But
good.
just say that they can't have a certificate of occupancy until they have it.
And so how about you
that's
take, yeah, so how about you
That's
take
true.
it like the opposite way so that it doesn't sound like you were saying, Lisa? And how about we say the space, that there has to be a dedicated space for it, because then that would mean that it could actually be contracted for. What do you
That's in
think
the
about
ordinance
going
now.
that route?
That is in the
But
ordinance.
it's not. It's not, if it's required, it's not being enforced. Because Starbucks is not able to recycle at their building because there is no space for it. The buildings that are.
They're just choosing not to use 90-gallon containers, which they could fit in the existing screening, I'll wager.
Well, the thing
They're
is.
just assuming it has to be a dumpster. No one says it has to be a dumpster.
Well, no,
If Seattle had a building that forgot to leave space for recycling, they had to have 30 90-gallon containers collected every day of recycling because they did not make space. It can be done.
I
They
don't,
use 90-gallon containers.
I don't disagree, Lisa. I'm just saying, I know the person who manages the Starbucks here, and they're very vehement that they don't have the room and it won't be provided by the
I guess-
building owner.
I guess the real question is
Michelle,
whether
the
it'd be helpful
key
to
difference,
ask that they
I'm
provide.
sorry, Essie, but
Sorry.
the parity ordinance that's required for that development was absolutely applied. How the building owner chooses to use the space on that trash enclosure is up to him.
So that, did you hear that,
Gotcha.
Lisa? See,
Yeah,
that's
that's the
interesting.
that's the loophole.
Yeah, so how do we get around that loophole? Did you catch that, Lisa, at all?
She's familiar with it, I think. We've talked about it a little
Yeah.
bit in the
Because
past.
he's saying that basically the space is required, but there's no, how did you word that?
Well, it's the exact thing I think you're deliberating
The
right
building
now, is how to
owners.
make the building owner
Right.
actually provide the recycling service
So
going
how
forward.
could we say that then without it sounding like
Or
you
have
have to
something-
contract for it?
And really, it's about the builder rather than the building owner. So it's about, like, I think for this, it's about whether it's useful to require additional space or not. And maybe if it's just something that the building owner is doing, then we should have that be kind of our, tacked onto our list of building owner things that we can
Okay.
discuss later.
That would be something that would have to be added to the Holler ordinance.
The law.
There's not there's not going to be any building owner that's going to.
Gonna do it voluntarily.
You never know.
So
But it would be something
that's
that
a
would have to be
bummer,
mandated.
because, so it doesn't sound like we were able to actually really get anywhere with mandatory recycling. So any other ideas?
Yes, I'm asking Martin a question. Martin, who gets the certificate of occupancy, a builder or an owner?
The person who builds the building is often the owner, but
Yes.
you're right. The person who
So I'm
owns the
saying
building.
They don't get a COO until they have a contract for recycling. That's what I'm
That's
saying.
not a bad idea.
Sure, that's
Okay.
absolutely an option.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it's including in the initial construction phase an ongoing item, though.
But it's so there's a handoff that you checklist and say, now I'll give you this, and you have to have a contract.
Okay.
But Lisa, it comes back to I think the optional catch-22 that you identified earlier, which is
could
somebody
still
gets a
drop.
certificate of occupancy
And
and
then
they
they
have a
move the
recycling
dumpsters?
contract and then they let it lapse and then don't renew it.
Right.
But it's a great first step.
Well, I guess you could go the non-regulatory route, and then if you're not going to regulate it, then next best thing is to publicly recognize those that do in some way through PACE, through builder counties. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas, but like.
You have to do the reverse of shaming, but highlight the
reverse
folks
of
who
shaming.
are.
They have to have electrical service, they have to have water service, they have to have trash and recycling service.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But if they shut off their water service, people wouldn't be able to, I guess it's a question of long-term enforcement versus short-term.
You can't make it a requirement of owners too, but and that's ongoing, but this is for builders.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maybe we'll need to be doing a little bit of digging, a creative way to word that.
Yeah.
So that it can really be effective and chosen, ideally.
And so the overarching idea
I
there.
think it should be optional, yeah.
All we have
So-
to do is put a Pokemon stop, and then the
There
kids
you
can
go.
tell us, they can report whether or not they're recycling.
There you go.
So I think given that that's more of a mandatory thing, we should
Yeah.
think about that alongside the IECC discussion as well. But is there anything we can do that's kind of a potential optional thing that would help improve waste for this particular thing?
During development.
Yeah, during development.
I mean, the third bullet in terms of making sure or identifying project, I guess the question is, what are the requirements, or do you want to have an optional requirement for the contractor during development to be recycling and composting and doing sustainable waste
We talked about that
management?
at length earlier, saying that they should have to be required to have a recycling dumpster. If they contract for trash service, they also have to have a recycling container during construction.
I think that's fair. That's a good one.
Well, so I have a general question, which is, it seems like most of the waste things that we're discussing, and in fact, most of the bullet points I had initially put down are more things that we want to have be kind of mandatory as opposed to optional. So is it worth having a waste management category for kind of this optional thing, or
Are there optional
or should we
waste
just get rid of that category and move that into the discussion of mandatory things that we want to push for?
That's an interesting
Mandatory
question.
things in this document as well. Can't we say, you know, the ones with stars are mandatory and the ones with points are you can choose?
Yeah, that's an interesting
true.
thing, because that's a way to slip in the IECC back. Yeah?
I do think it's valuable, though, to have two separate things, because if we combine mandatory and optional things into one single document, then my concern would be that'd be fairly easy for the board to just say yes or no to everything, as opposed to having separate parts that they have to evaluate separately.
Okay.
And one of my hopes with having kind of more optional things was that they could adopt the optional thing first, and then we can push for the mandatory things very hard after that, but at least it gets a foot in the door. And so my inclination would be to have two kind of separate proposals. One is for kind of the, pick two of any of these type of approach, and then also have a, by the way, we want to increase codes and standards as well, and have more, robust standards around how we deal with waste and things like that that are mandatory for everyone.
Okay.
I guess I would argue the opposite. I think putting them in now as, on a mandatory list allows the council to say, okay, we're going to take all these mandatory things later. If we don't do it now, it's going to look like we kicked the can down the street, and we're not as interested in those as we are in these other things.
Well, here's
and let people just say, okay, we're done.
But how about we go ahead and try to do a skim mandatory thing? And they are still two separate things, I guess he's saying, but we can probably define a fairly clean mandatory list at this point.
And that's what I was thinking, is not kicking the can at all, but just having two separate things that were
mandatory requires ordinance, correct? Absolutely. If you're going to make it mandatory, you can't just have it in a checklist that says you have to do this thing that I've starred and you will do these options. Because if there's no law on the books in the town, why would the developer? The mandatory doesn't actually hold weight, I suppose, is
and
the
that's why I
issue.
think for something like this, that's designed to be a quick win.
Right.
It'd be helpful not to incorporate mandatory stuff in that as well. And it has nothing to do with our priorities necessarily. I think we're all, on the same page that we want to push for, very stringent energy efficiency, waste management strategies and stuff. But this would be something that ideally would be a very quick win that could start to apply to the immediate construction for the town center. And then, while we work through the ordinances and other things with the town board to push for much more stringent regulations.
You're right, because then this could even be in that ordinance, there's this updated list or whatever, because this is something that can be a little bit more.
Exactly.
You could keep this option in waste management, and then later you just say, we want this to be permanent.
Or mandatory. You could, I would say, keep them in the list. Don't worry about the mandatory requirement. Have them here for discussion.
Yeah.
Because the idea is you want the development review board to look at these and say, and give this to a developer and say, yeah, I want you to look at this and be aware of this, and have the development review board use this in negotiations. If they have a variance, you want to have the development review board, starting as soon as they receive this piece of paper, it doesn't require approval, say, I'm going to start using this in my negotiations. When they say they want a narrower sidewalk, I'll say, great, you pick two off this list. Two more, even.
I like that a lot better because it doesn't seem like a surprise.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So but those things would be the optional things. The mandatory requirements that the developers would need to know ahead of doing their design builds. That's a timeline that you just have to explore.
Different.
Yeah.
I worry about the efficacy of kind of merging those two.
I agree.
Well, the risk is you lose all opportunities, because if the mandatory.
Even saying merging them, putting the mandatories in here and saying don't worry about them right now.
Well, when I say mandatory, I'm saying instead of requiring them to be mandatory in this list, keep the waste management options in the list. Don't worry about identifying them as mandatory or not.
Right.
This is the list of things we want the development review board to be negotiating with and or possibly requiring them to pick from as part of their development review process.
Yeah.
However that process works, I don't know. But Lisa, what I'm saying is, I think that if any of these things were to become mandatory, that can still be a conversation, but if it's going to be an ordinance and a law that has to be passed and the Board of Trustees has to actually go through that, you might miss a development that's happening tomorrow that this,
Right.
the Development Review Board, as soon as they have this list, could actually start working the negotiations.
We can build off of this and
Yeah.
make it
It's
bigger,
a
make
long
it better.
process.
And
Yeah,
get everything
versus
in.
waiting for ordinances to be passed, and then you don't get the opportunity to even seize on some development that might happen in the short term.
And again, that was one of the things we discussed a lot at the last meeting, was that, we definitely highly prioritize all the mandatory codes and standards and improving those, but looking for something that the board could approve very quickly that could apply immediately, in addition to all those other things. And so I think that was kind of the thought with this type of approach.
Okay,
See,
good.
didn't we discuss that at the time they get their permits, the code in effect at that time that's driving the train?
Right, that's true. Once they have their building permit, they can't,
Yeah, like.
well, that is a problem. I think if they're going to submit their preliminary drawings, if they're submitting their preliminary drawings in 2 months, really the most useful thing would be probably to look at the timeline for the developers and to see if it's even feasible realistically to pass an ordinance before they're going to get their preliminary designs done.
It's not even.
And if it's not, then it's not worth breath and time trying to force the ordinance down someone's throat because it won't even be in place by the time these builders build. And then what you've done is you've put energy into it and the builders are going to go, I'm grandfathered in, I already submitted
Yeah.
my paperwork.
And that was our concern last meeting as
Yeah.
well.
Trying to
So-
start something.
So the idea was to have not temporary, but something we could get passed very quickly because it's not an official ordinance, to help get the ball rolling, and then we can work on, increasing
And
all the mandatory things.
the piece of this that I like, aside from what they're choosing, is it for the board, because the review board is the Board of Trustees, or the Planning Commission, then the Board of, in their review process to start negotiating, we'd like you to do these things and get that as part of the approval. In
Well, it
addition-
builds sustainability into their behavior, which is
Exactly.
not something that it sounds like that review board necessarily, if it's not in code, they're not, sustainability isn't at the forefront of their mind because they don't have a list like this to
But
say,
it-
oh, I have
It is
things
always,
to do.
I mean, when, like when we did the town center design standards and things like that, sustainability plays.
It's
in all that.
section, sure, yeah, but to have options when you're actually in the live negotiation phase is so
Exactly.
useful because I think a lot of times, absent anything, nothing will happen.
Right. Okay, good. So I think we're good on waste management. Anything we feel like we need to add there?
Should we get rid of the combined recycling, composting, and trash receptacles since it's more on the building owner, or leave that in for the time
I
being?
say leave it in.
Okay, so
It's
let's leave
just
those three.
providing
I think it
designated
encourages
space.
a way, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to have the
For something to
discussion.
happen that we are having a hard time defining. how to
Separate
happen.
too, then, and give an option and
Then we
say,
should put the contracting and service in there too, because it's no different than combining. In fact, it's more related to a builder than big receptacles.
I'm not against putting that in there because it's something that they can nix if they want
I
or
agree.
whatever. They can adopt it or change it. So I'm not against
Cool.
that.
So what's-
What were you saying, Alex?
just to have, if they're gonna have a trash receptacle, they have a recyclable during their construction.
So maybe,
Oh, yeah, not
right,
just
I
for
like
the,
that,
yeah, I like
have
that.
trash.
That's actually missing is we're talking about the building specifically,
Yeah,
but the
have trash at
contractor
construction
should
site,
have
then
trash
also
and
have to have
recycling on site throughout the whole project.
Cool.
As a, I don't know if that should be multiple choice. That might be a starred one that says,
Mm-hmm.
we want this to be a requirement.
Okay, I think that's good.
Actually, that should be part of the building code, I would think.
really
I
should.
think it should be, but if
Let's
it's
hold off
not,
on that, because I think that's something that we should really be pushing for, something that everyone's doing rather than just
Sure.
an optional, take this
Yeah.
if you want to do it. Okay, so we'll keep those bullets largely as is, and then how would you phrase your idea, Lisa?
Which one?
Or for the addition to waste management?
That you have to
the
have
certificate of occupancy.
to get your
That you
certificate.
have to have recycling, that the builder has to contract for both trash and recycling while they're building, and that the building has to have contracted recycling along with trash before they can get a COO.
Is that a good optional thing for this particular
I don't,
list.
but I think we
I
could
would
leave
put
it
it
like
here.
that for now.
I would put
and-
it here for the review
Yeah.
board to be aware of.
Exactly.
I don't think
Perfect.
it's something you have to worry about passing through code.
Yeah, I
'Cause
like
it-
the thought of it, and we just need to figure out, how to kind of
If
tweak it.
the board
yeah.
looks at it and has questions, at least it starts a discussion.
Cool,
Yeah.
that sounds great.
Completely
I'll go ahead and
agree.
add that in then.
Perfect. All right, so last section, community. Install a green roof, install bike racks, install one or more charging stations for electric vehicles, provide space for community garden, CSA, or gathering place, and then implement an innovative sustainability project not listed above. So I know the couple that,
The green roof include white painted.
It'd be good to stipulate that, because that, to me, doesn't count as much as a true green roof.
so
Yeah, because I've heard of that as being referred to as a cool roof, whereas green roof is specific to having plants. And so,
I know, but I'm also, there was a fight some years ago, not about people not wanting the look of a white roof, but in this climate, it's crazy not to at least have that.
And-
So, and I don't know what a green roof does for water use here in this area and all that sort of stuff. How practical are green roofs in this area? I don't know.
well, I think it's interesting, because maybe we should, if it's called a cool roof, maybe that should be a separate option, because with the way that commercial building facades can be built and so forth, the implications of a white roof aren't necessarily so bad.
Part of me wonders if this isn't all fitting in a category, because you're trying to reduce the building heat island effect. If it's green roof, cool roof, and shade trees don't all fit in one kind of like, do something to make your building not so hot. It's the
Okay.
passive solar, it's like the opposite of passive solar, or it is passive solar, but kind of on the flip side, trying not to overheat it. But I
Why
don't
would
know.
you lump those? I'm sorry, Colleen.
I was gonna say, this is like downhill from a lot of people. They're giving up a nice open space. And I would say that if the white roof is unattractive, that I hate to even put that out there, because that might be something they would do. And then I would hate to do that
And
to
then
all
make
those people
everybody-
on the hill. You know, that if the white roofs are really ugly.
Well, here's a good thing, because I do agree with you, and I don't know if you've had the opportunity to sit in through like an building approval meeting at all. They would absolutely take that into consideration as to whether or not you could see that.
Before
and whether
they
they
do.
did approve it, but if we did make something like that option, maybe go ahead and make a stipulation, may not be acceptable in all
Pending
areas
approval.
or something like that.
there are also a lot of cool roof paints now that have the same emissivity and reflectivity characteristics as white paint, but they're colored, so they don't look, they look a little bit more,
I've never heard of a cool roof before. How did I miss this?
Yeah, I would say cool roofs, green roofs, shade trees,
Yeah, I didn't know if you were
Okay.
using the term green
Awnings
broadly or
even.
not, so that's why I asked.
No, I
Even-
think that was good. We brought up a good discussion.
even things like solar awnings or awnings would be another way to,
yeah, that's true.
solar awnings or regular, I mean, part of me thinks this is just like a building cooling category.
Well, actually, so one
So yeah,
question.
you could almost make like a big thing, like provide a way to, jump over you, but yeah, like provide like a general category, figure out a way, I'm not using good words here, figure out a way to reduce your heat
The heat
envelope
effect.
or whatever.
yeah, or the
And then,
heat.
put these options underneath there,
So one thing, just to complicate matters, apologies. I know that since Colorado's heating dominated, my understanding was that cool roofs actually were not a net benefit in Colorado. Obviously, they help a lot in the summer, but
They
the
don't help
negative
you in the
impact
winter.
in the winter, my understanding was offsets the benefits in this particular climate. Whereas like green roofs, actually, because they're adding thermal mass to the building, can have year-round
effect.
positive impacts. Obviously, I'm not sure about the water impacts for here, but that would be my only concern with having an explicit mention of cool roofs. And I think that, building shell stuff should be included in IECC as well. Is that true, or?
That's true. I don't have a copy of the IECC.
Yeah, that's fine. So that would be my only concern there with adding a section specifically about cool roofs versus
Yeah.
green roofs. I'm not sure, Lisa, if you have any knowledge around that.
I'm nervous about doing this optional prescriptive approach when people spend decades, putting together lists. So I don't care whether it goes in or not. I'm just mentioning things that I think are useful.
Okay, cool, thanks.
All right. So is there anything that anybody would like to add to this? I like the providing a space for community garden or CSA. I think we'll have to skip the gathering place for local farmers market only because,
Well,
again, it
'cause
goes
it's
back
on
to the
there.
enforcement. And I think that
Well,
would be.
the gathering space is kind of in the design of the town center.
It's already there.
That's true. So we can just get rid of that.
Not that I don't like it, I'm just saying.
The
yeah.
plaza's
No,
there.
absolutely.
That's
Just trying to think
celebratory space for events, farmers markets, things
Yeah,
like that.
so you really
So
don't
should
need
we
the
leave in the community garden?
Garden
Sorry,
or the
that's stuck over
CSA.
you. Or
Yeah, like
CSA?
that. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's like you're basically asking a commercial developer to give up some acreage for building design,
Yeah.
which
To
again,
do
they
something
probably wouldn't do, but maybe in a situation where they wanted to be 10 feet higher than code, or they wanted a different setback. You could make that in a negotiation. So I say keep it in, because the idea is give the board opportunities for negotiation.
Cool.
And that's what this is for.
And then, so obviously, we've added in awnings, and then I know earlier we talked about walkability/trails or something like that, so that's a good one.
That's a good one.
And then I was thinking, I don't know, I know we already have some of this in the town, Lisa, you're probably more aware of it, and so is Martin and Joe, too. Like, how about like something, this is kind of, we've seen it before, like by business, but I was thinking like an eco-pass, the car share or whatever program for the building, not for the business, but for the building. So like,
It would
if you
fall
were
in
the
the-
owner of yours, you would have, even if you had 10 businesses in there, you provided this resource. I
Right.
don't know what you guys think.
Or if you're the property management company.
Yeah.
I would say that probably falls in post-development, but I like
Okay.
the idea of the eco-pass being something to put in maybe our future discussion.
Okay.
Especially if we have this
building
discussion
owners.
of things to look at for building owners, that'd be
Yeah.
a great thing to
Okay.
add in.
And the thing with building owners is you have to think about when they're going to come upon needing to get something from the city or from the town that would require them to have to do a menu of options, if it wasn't code or if it was.
Okay. Sounds great. Anything else that we should add to this?
So we're basically making this list and handing it to the town board, and we're hoping that they kind of negotiate some of this in.
Well,
That's where we're kind of at right now. Is that is that what?
Was the idea they'd approve this as
Yeah,
something to use
you have to
as
walk them
part
through
of-
this whole idea.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the idea would be that they'd accept, mostly the whole thing. Obviously, there are going to be changes made, but so that whenever a new builder wants to build something, that they'd have to do at least one or two of these things before they'd be allowed to build.
I wanted to change that whole intro paragraph, or at least the last sentence of it. We don't want them to adopt two of the following measures. I mean, I think bike racks, oh my God.
Right.
So,
Too low.
I think we should assign points or try to assign points or do something, but
Sure.
picking any two is just like crazy because there's something that'll cost you, $100 and things that'll cost you $20,000.
Yeah, so I would love for that
Yeah.
to be the next step, and that I think we'll have to do via email, but
Get rid of that
yeah.
last sentence.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what we would do is, yeah, I think like you said, we'll have to evaluate and maybe assign some points. I don't know if you guys think that a better point evaluation is always from 1 to 5 on a particular object or 1 to 10.
I think for something like this,
I
since
think
they're
we can
real.
look at lead to find out what the score,
Yeah.
the scores ought to be.
Okay.
Or
Lead-
look at costs as a really big indicator.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll come up with that, and then my thought has been based on that, we'd come up with like, they have to make this many points.
Yeah, you're aiming for 10 points or
Yeah.
20 points, whether they do it
Yeah.
with 3, 5, 10, all
What
of
do you
them.
think about that, Lisa?
I think that sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to figure out the dollars or the point, the
Yeah.
relatives first, and then we can pick any number we want.
Yeah.
We can make that 9, 10, 100, 1,000, I don't care.
Perfect.
It doesn't matter, it's all relative.
I think that's perfect. Okay, good, so.
So as a next step,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to go through and make all the changes we discussed, and then add some preliminary points, at least as a basis for
Just
discussion,
an
and
idea,
then
yeah.
via email we can discuss further and see if that's reasonable, if there's something we should change, and then once we're all more or less okay with it, then Martin, what's the next step for this?
So we need to have this finalized before the next meeting on our end, is that right?
Well, it depends on what the committee wants to present. If you want to include a recommendation in the meeting notes with this group, and then we can include the attachment, and then something the committee can show up and talk about as a non-agenda item, or maybe Joe could mention it during his
I'm thinking,
update
I'm
item.
thinking maybe work session. I will never give a justice in an update.
Yeah, so
I think we can get on for a work session item would be.
Okay.
so our agendas are full through probably the end of October. I think that would be the second
Yeah,
meeting
and that
in
was the other
October.
reason, Lisa's, yeah, we were trying to get on an agenda soon, and we had to have something,
Immediately.
I just
Something
wanna make sure
chewable
we
to get
don't
on an
mention
agenda.
stuff, but we should do that right away or concurrently as well.
yeah, so.
Absolutely.
So I say, yeah, go with what Martin said, is that you're gonna go ahead and get it on the recommendations that we said to review?
Yeah, so the final document, so the board will see this when they see the meeting notes, and then the finalists that the group agrees on, they'll see it in the meeting notes that we'll put together and be included in the town board's meeting packet for the next meeting this month.
Unless we submit this without points first and get it on the agenda as soon as possible, and then start assigning points at our next meeting, since we won't be on the agenda till October anyway.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, so how about, yeah, I think that's good. So if
I
Essie,
hold it up.
so when does the next meeting packet due then, Martin?
It'll be the week after next, so you got plenty of time.
So, so that'll be our goal. So then before the
I mean, I
next
can
meeting-
make all the changes we discussed tonight and then send it off to you and
And then we just
everyone
all
else.
commit to reviewing it and make sure that we add comment or whatever that we need to, so that Martin can include it in that next board packet. And then, yeah, like Lisa said, we can all think about what points would be assigned and tackle that at the next meeting. Everybody good with that?
Sure. So I'll try and get the meeting notes. It'll be pretty brief. So if I get those out tomorrow or Monday, then you have really through Thursday to get them finalized.
Okay.
Okay.
So you have
So we got
basically a
about a
week from
week.
today.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna do it tonight, so that'll be easy. And
Awesome.
then I'll
A
be.
week for a bulleted, edited thing, not a week for points, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's
Right.
just the cleaning this up so that it can be put on.
It's just kind of the official record from this particular meeting, but not the finalized version
You
yet.
can put points with X's and just fill them in later.
That's true. That might be a good
Yeah,
idea.
just
Yeah.
put X or TBD, and
Okay.
that way at
Okay.
least they know it will be on a point system.
Perfect.
And they can go ahead and change the language, Lisa, that you had mentioned as well. So that'll all be taken care of. So, yeah, I think that sounds good. And then I'm unfortunately going to have to miss the next RCAC meeting. So if there's anything I can do, yeah, I know. But if we are discussing points, if we can do that kind of via email or some other communications strategy, I'd be more than happy to help out. But I'm just going to be gone for one single day, and that's the day that RCAC
That's
meeting
okay,
happens.
but I
so.
think that's still, because, it's one of those things, you can put your input on, and if we have a different idea of how the scale of points works after that meeting or something like that, we'll just say, hey, where do you think you are with these?
Yeah, that sounds great.
So, yeah,
Cool.
but maybe go ahead and, just put your thoughts down, and I can bring them. with
Yeah,
me or
I'll go ahead and
something
edit
like that.
this, and then, Martin, you can have that as a record from this meeting, and then I'll put together another one with some sample points, and people can think about it, and we can discuss it, or you guys can discuss it at the next
You
meeting.
guys rock, thank you. Okay, well, I guess we're done then for this meeting.
Okay.
Thanks,
As
Lisa.
soon as you get some different versions of some points, you should start circulating it.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's gonna do that tonight, it sounds like, Lisa.
Yeah, I'm just gonna edit this one tonight without points.
Just do the one with bullets for tonight, I'd say.
Yeah,
Make
that's-
sure you get that out so you can get in the packet.
Yeah, so that's what I'm gonna do tonight, and then over the next week or two, I'll send out a one just to the group with some sample points, and we can discuss that further. So, yeah.
Rockstar, yay, peeps.
Cool, sounds good.
You demand.
All right.
That was a fast-paced meeting. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you being available, because having more people is a good thing.
Yeah, and Lisa, I'll look forward to seeing you at the end of the month at ACEEE.
Yep, I'll be there.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody. See you next month.
In California, in Monterey.
Oh, tough duty.
Yeah, I know, it's rough.
But you're only gonna be there for one day?
No, so that one's the end of this month, so I'll be there for a week, and then, I know, it's really rough, and then I come back for a week, and then,
Pays for your hotel, is they have to work?
yeah, because it's a full work conference, so.
I have a social life.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a presentation and presenting a paper and stuff, so that'll be cool.